Hi, I'm Sean Fox and welcome to another episode of Made to Ramble. Now, I've been racking my brain since this whole COVID-19 thing started. Just trying to figure out what on earth I'm going to do now that travel's not on the cards. Very few opportunities to get out there and make videos now. Western Australia is locked down pretty tight. We're broken into regions and travel between those regions is restricted. So a lot of the places where I would normally head to do a bit of landscape photography are just inaccessible now. So what can we do to keep things interesting at home? Not had a lot of luck photographing my dogs. They really don't want to stay still for me. So I figured I should try my hand at a little bit of product photography. So in this episode, we're going to do this. But first, alright, so I'm not an expert in product photography. I'm not even a professional photographer, but I have been spending quite a bit of time just lately reading and watching tutorials, and after practicing with quite a few different household items, my confidence is growing. So I figured I might share some of what I've learned with you fine folk. Now, I have been struggling to find an appropriate photographic subject for this video, something with an interesting shape or color or texture. Been looking around the house for something. I did think about using this little portable speaker or this or this. Eventually what I settled on is this douche looking thing. Anyone need an enema? Now this is actually a sensor cleaning kit, supposedly. In the top here we have a little blower, little brush, and in the bottom here we have this weird gooey shit. Does anyone know what this is for? I think it's probably for picking up dust, but I would not be letting this stuff anywhere near my sensor. Anyway, charming. This is what we've got to work with. So let's get started. Alright, so I've created this little set here with a portable table. I'm going to put this white bit of board on top of the table so that the douche is sitting on a white surface with a whitish wall behind. It's actually a very light blue, but it's close enough. Just being a soft neutral color means that it'll be pretty easy to separate the object when we're trying to cut it out in Photoshop. The background isn't going to be visible in the final shot anyway. I have two lights here. They're continuous LED panels, which I would normally use for video, but they're pretty well suited for this type of photography as well. I don't own any off-camera flashes, and really I wouldn't know how to use one anyway for doing this sort of thing. I quite like working with continuous lighting. You can see what you get really. You can see exactly how the photo is going to be exposed. Now, these lights are a little bit harsh, so I might add a diffusion umbrella here to soften the lights. Now you can pick up these sort of umbrella and light stands really pretty cheaply. And just jump on Amazon for a few minutes and you'll see they're actually pretty affordable. These LED lights are a little more expensive, but that said, you really don't have to spend a lot of money. If you buy some cheapies for like, I don't know, I think I've seen them for like $20 on Amazon. Obviously they're not going to be particularly color accurate, and they may not be super bright, but you're not doing this professionally at this stage, so I don't see why you would spend a lot of money for something that you may not end up doing a lot of. Oops, where am I going? Well, that should help. All right, so that looks a little bit better. It's managed to eliminate any harsh shadows there. I have my camera set up here on a tripod. This is my trusty Sony A6400. I'm just using the kit lens here. The great thing about product photography is that you don't really want to use a wide open aperture. You want everything to be in focus, so it's not really necessary to spend money on expensive prime lenses. I've just got the aperture set to f8 here. What does matter though is the focal length. You want to avoid making the subject look distorted, so you certainly wouldn't use a wide angle lens. You really want to use a nice kind of portrait focal length. This lens only goes to 50mm on the long end. It's crop sensor though, which means that it's kind of equivalent to 75mm in full frame terms. That's a pretty nice focal length for capturing a very natural looking photo without any distortion. It's a pretty common focal length for portraiture for that same reason. Now what's really important here is that we're lined up straight. You don't want the camera to be below the subject looking up at it, because this distorts the perspective. You know how if you photograph a building from below, it sometimes looks like the building's leaning towards you? The same thing would happen here. It would look like it's leaning towards the camera. Now, if you're photographing from above, that can also warp the perspective. It makes the object look kind of small in the frame. So yeah, you definitely want to shoot straight on. I have the camera connected to my laptop, tethered. This is partly so that I can get a better view and make absolutely sure that the subject is in focus and that the composition looks okay. But it's also handy in that it allows me to trigger the shutter remotely so that I don't touch the camera and risk introducing some vibration. Now, you don't necessarily need to tether to do this. You could operate it remotely via Wi-Fi with an app on your phone, or alternatively, you could set the self-timer to about 10 seconds, just so that it has enough time to settle and that there's no vibration. But this is, for me, a little more handy in this situation. And I'm just making sure that I'm properly in focus here. I'm manually focusing so that it doesn't shift at all. So let's take a bit of a test shot here to see if it looks okay. Oops. Looks like I left the self-timer on. Yeah, it doesn't actually matter, that could be handy in this case. Not too bad. It doesn't look like it's over or underexposed, so that's a good start. The light looks a little bit flat, but this is only the first shot, and I'm planning to try out a little trick here that might help to introduce a little bit of detail. All right, I've got a little LED light here. You can probably just use a torch or your phone or whatever, but I'm going to use this. And so the idea here is to take a few shots and just try and etch out any detail so that it gives us a few options for blending with the original shot in post. Just looking for anything that might just add a little bit of detail or an attractive looking highlight. So just a few different shots from different angles to see how it looks. There's a good chance we probably won't end up using a lot of these, but you never can tell. You don't want it to be too crazy bright, of course, because then it's just going to overexpose. Just going to bring out too much, add too much highlight. What about directly above? Really just taking a guess here. I don't know what's going to end up being usable or not. Somehow from kind of behind. What would that look like? Right, I think I'm just about done here. I guess it's time to clean up and head into the studio and start editing these photos. I'll see you there. Alright, so here we are in my studio and I've loaded these photos up into Adobe Lightroom Classic. And what I'm going to do first up, because these are just raw photos, is I'll bring the contrast up just a little bit in them, just make a few little changes, just lower the highlights, bring up the shadows, that sort of thing. Add in some contrast, maybe a little bit of clarity. Maybe bring up the, just play with the masking here. Sharpening, and I'll make sure that the profile correction is applied. Looks okay. Of course, you'll notice that there's a little smudge there, either on the sensor or on the lens, and of course it turns out I didn't put the cap back on properly, so oh well. Anyway, what I will do is I will copy those develop settings. I'll just go check all, copy, and then I will add in these same develop settings there. So we'll go paste settings, and there we go. That should be applied to all of them. A couple of these photos are a little bit overexposed, so I'll just drop the exposure down there to match. Alrighty. I'll highlight these and I will go into edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. Can take a little while to do this. Alright, so that's all done. This first photo here at the top is the base exposure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that right down to the bottom. Right, and the other ones I'm going to highlight and Control G just to add them into a group, and I'm going to turn those off. So we're going to say, actually what I'll do first of all is I might just grab each of these and go edit auto align layers, and I'll just leave that in auto. Unfortunately, I think I knocked the tripod a little. Yeah, you can see there's been some movement there. Alright, so now I'll turn off this group, and now what we're going to do is we're going to cut this image out. So I'm going to hit P for pen, and I'm going to zoom right in. Find a nice little starting point. It doesn't really matter where I start at this point, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the Alt button and left click on the mouse, and then I'm just going to click at another point, and you can see now if I move without taking my finger off, using these two little arms, I can actually change the shape of the join there, the line. So now obviously this isn't going to be particularly interesting, so what I'm going to do in a minute is speed this up. This does take some time. Alright, so you can see there I've selected all of that. Now the reason why I chose this subject, of course, for this first video is just because it's, you know, not all that complicated. So I just wanted to make it something that would be relatively easy to cut out. Now, of course, there are other easier ways to do this. You could just use the quick selection tool, but in this case I thought I would rather use the pen tool, try and do it a little bit more precisely. Alright, so that said, now all I have to do, I'll hit save first, I think. Save, and then I will go Control and Enter, which makes it a proper selection. There we go, and now all I need to do is to add a mask to that. And there we have it, it's cut out. So let's just zoom in on that. You can see that the background of that is now totally transparent. And it doesn't look too bad. I think down here I could have done a little bit of a better job on it, but I won't be too worried about that. Okay, that looks all right. And what I might actually do is just add a solid color underneath. We'll just go with white for now. I'll put that under there. There we go, just so we can see it a little bit better. All right, so that's that. And what I'll also do is it the Alt button? Is that what I need to do? Yep. So what I've done is I've hit Alt and then copied that onto the group folder so that now basically all of these are also cut out. So with that done, what I might do is create a bit of a shadow underneath that. So to do that, just below the below this layer here, I'm going to add another layer. Oops, add it below. So to add below, you actually hit the Control and then the Create New Layer button. All right, and so I'm going to go up into the elliptical marquee tool, and I'm going to create just a little sort of oval shape underneath it. Move that, kind of even it out a bit, and now I hit Control Delete. All right, so, and now I'll go deselect, Control D for deselect, and we're going to just add a little bit of blur to it. We'll go with a Gaussian blur. All right, and we'll go with quite a lot of blur for this one. What we're going to do is layer together several of these to create a more natural looking shadow. So another layer underneath that. Oh, hang on, I'll rename that actually. Shadow 1. All right, and then Control and Layer, and we'll name this one Shadow 2. And we'll make this one just a little bit smaller. So we'll go like there, and again it's Control Delete and then Control Deselect, and once again we'll add another Gaussian blur, but this time a little bit less blur. So we'll make that around 61 pixels maybe. Alright, and then a third layer, we'll call this one Shadow 3. And once again we'll do this, but we'll go a little bit smaller still, maybe like that, and Control Delete, and then Control D for deselect, and once again adding a little bit more, a little bit less blur I should say. So we'll go down to, we'll go to 48, maybe 55, yeah, we'll do 55. I don't know if that's a little bit too much. Maybe I'll lower the opacity on all of these just a little bit. Alright, and now we'll do one more, which will make just a really small shadow. So Control and then add layer, and we'll go Shadow 4. And last elliptical, we'll make this one basically just the right size for fitting underneath here. So yeah, and then Control Delete, Control D for deselect, and last but not least we'll do just add a little bit more blur. Maybe I'll still lower the opacity there. Maybe I could move that a little bit. Control T. I'm just going to move it a bit further underneath so that it's sort of that. There we go, that's not too bad. Alright, so we've done those. I'm just going to add these all together into a group. Control G, and we'll call this group Shadow. Should probably give this, just call this Original Exposure. Alright. So we've got that now. We've got our original exposure and we've got a shadow underneath it, and we've got sort of just a blank white background. So now what we'll do is we'll take a look at these, and we'll just turn each of these off. And one at a time we'll take a look and see if there's anything interesting here that we could add. Obviously you've got quite a strong highlight here, but I don't know that I'm too interested in using that. But there's a little bit of a highlight up there, I think. Yeah, I kind of like that little bit of a highlight up there, and maybe just what it's doing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the brush tool, B for brush, and I'm going to add to this a black, so we hit the Alt button and then a black mask, and what I can do is just brush in those little bits of highlights that I like the look of. I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to add that little highlight in here. Hang on, make sure that I've selected the white to draw it in. Otherwise it won't do very much. And I've just gone with a very low flow Alright, looks pretty good, and I'll draw this in here. We're just doing it to taste. I mean, I could bring in this highlight, but I don't think I want that highlight. So hit X and you can draw away that highlight. So taking a look at this, we can go with, without, whoops, with, without. I haven't made a lot of change, just a little bit. Just enough to just etch out a little bit of extra detail up here and to give this kind of nice highlight there. All right, so the next one, what can we see? Ooh, I like the highlight up here. Just adds a bit of extra shape to it. And I kind of like the highlight down here. Is there anything else there? Whoops, sorry, going the wrong one. Well, there's a little bit of a highlight here as well that I might end up using. So Alt and then hit the mask, and we'll start up around here. Whoops, X for white. So you can see we've managed to bring quite a lot of extra detail along here that we couldn't really see before, as well as a little bit up here too. It's certainly not perfect, but it gives you some idea of how you do this. What I'll do is I'll hit Shift, Control, Alt and E, and we'll create a new layer there on the top, and I'll add maybe a little bit of a high pass filter to it. We won't overdo it here, just enough to give it a little extra sharpening, and I'll hit the overlay button. See if that makes, yeah, it definitely makes a little bit of a difference. You can see here, if we zoom in on it, this is without it, and this is with it. So yeah, it's a little bit sharper. We could have done something like changed the actual color. If we wanted to, you could change it to something like that, which I think actually looks pretty cool. Although obviously it really starts to show off where I did a bad job cutting it out. I think I prefer it white. Alright, well that's about all for this episode. Thanks very much for watching. This is the first of these types of tutorials that I've tried to do, so I do hope that this has been of benefit to some of you. If so, let me know in the comments if you want to see more videos like this. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done so already. I hope to have another video out in a few weeks, so keep an eye out for that. Until then, thanks very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.